Good evening and welcome to yet another session of the Awarelogue Lecture Forum. On this particular session, in the month of September, we have decided to dedicate both of our ALF sessions to a very important grouping movement that gathered a lot of momentum in the past. This was a grouping that had far-reaching consequences on the world, whether it was in terms of ideological differences in the world, the political divide that had taken place, and the fact that several countries, including Sri Lanka, were very much involved in this entire process of building a third force in the world, and that was the non-aligned movement. Going back in history, in 1961, exactly 60 years ago yesterday, you had the closing of the first non-aligned movement summit taking place in Belgrade in Yugoslavia, which was held from the 1st to the 6th of September. August this year was also timely, and it is the topic that we want to focus on today. We're talking about various accusations are being made. We're talking about a new Cold War evolving in the world. We're talking about various differences that are taking place. To decipher all of this, to discuss all of this, we have invited a very senior academic from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. I'm indeed honored and privileged, Professor, that you've taken time to join us despite your busy schedule. Thank you so much for your time. If I may briefly introduce you, Professor. He is the former chairperson of the Center for South Asian Studies and the former director of the Energy Studies program at the School of International Studies at the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. His areas of specialization include India's foreign policy, political security issues, socio-economic and foreign policy issues of South Asian countries. In addition, the professor is also the recipient of several international awards, including the SRT Fellow Award 2009-2010 from the London School of Economics and Political Science, also the recipient of the Asia Fellows Award from the University of Dhaka. He has been an ICSSR Fellow at the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences and has authored numerous publications, books, monographs, and articles, as well as research papers in the course of his academic journey. He is currently working on several research projects as well. His forthcoming book has been titled The Chinese Shadow on India's Eastward Engagement, the Energy Security Dimension, which is probably an area we can go into in the course of the discussion this evening, Professor. So without further ado, I would like to invite Professor Dr. Sanjay K. Bhardwaj to address the gathering. Professor, over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. George Cook, for giving this opportunity, inviting me to speak on a topic that is not much in discussion today, though I'm much not in the academia as well as in the media and in the discourse of states. So thank you very much. And I think by this deliberations and with this interaction, this subject would be understood by scholars, students, and policymakers as well, that how non-aligned movement is going ahead and how, if it is relevant, how it is relevant. Let them take their thinking about whether it is relevant or not, but I would just put the current ongoing international systemic pressures or regional systemic pressures over the states, or particularly in the global south, that how we are looking at the different issues and how the states are moving ahead. Particularly, you have was talking about South Asia, India and Sri Lanka. Of course, they have been leading this movement from 1961 onward. We are on about 60 years to complete today. So let me give you one theoretical backgrounds, and as well as the then I'll come with what is happening around the world and how we are moving ahead, particularly the South Asian states, India and Sri Lanka and other states in South Asia. You know, to understand the significance, the importance of this institutions, this organization, non-aligned movement or policy, that it has been termed that non-aligned policy. You need to understand how it had come into existence, what are the backgrounds and what are the issues that leads to formulate this kind of institutions or organizations or on the international fora. Let me come out with how do I find the states in this international system, and I do draw the idea from Robert Cohen's work that he has defined states a category. He tried to categorize the states through its system theory, that what type of states are existing all over the world and how they are acting and reacting on different issues of international concerns or common concerns. Let me come first type of states that he had given us, that is the system determining states. Who are these states? That these kinds of states play a decisive role to determine and shape the international system. That you can understand that how the Cold War politics and the world was divided into two superpower in 1950s onward, and how they were determining the system, they were shaping the world or international system over the years, particularly during the Cold War period. So one type of state, I can term that system determining state. There are another type of state, even they are existing today, and as the system determining state exists, there are system influencing state. Who are these? These categories of state can't be individually dominate the system, but have capabilities to influence it by their unilateral as well as multilateral actions. So you can see that you have to define, you have to design that what type of states are system determining states today, and who were the system determining states in 1950s and 60s while the NAM came into existence. So there, like you can see that USSR and USA were system determining states. They were leading the world ideologically, politically. Now today, you have to understand who are the system determining states, either United States or it is China or Russia or what. But the second category, the system influencing state, while you are exploring, you are looking that they do not, they try to influence the system unilaterally or multilateral actions. And that defines that new organizations, new multi-alignment policies are coming over the international fora, and they are determining individually and collectively the international system. Third is the system affecting state. That system affecting state, you can see that which the system affecting state, just a minute. The system affecting states, these states can't determine or influence the system by their own, but through small groups or alliances, they exert significant impact on the system. These are the states that you can see comparatively smaller states, smaller power on different pockets of the world, in Asia, in Africa, or in Latin America, and all that they are system affecting states, but these states can't determine or influence the system by their own, but small groups or alliances, they exert significant impact on the system. And the fourth type of state, you can see that the system ineffectual states, these are states that can't do little or little to influence the system-wide force that affect them, except in groups which are so large that each state has minimal influence and which may themselves be dominated by large power. So you can see that the world basically defined and designed into four categories. One, which is the system influencing or determining or shaping states. The others are system influencing states. Now, if you are really examining the present current situation, while we are exploring the relevance of NAM, which had been founded in early 1960s or 50s, you can say that how that NAM is relevant in the context of this system theory or in the context of international system. There you can see, if either the world is unipolar or it is multipolar, or it is politically unipolar or militarily unipolar, but economically bipolar or multipolar. And culturally it is multipolar. What type of state is there? But where do we exist in that? Where does China exist? Where India exists in this? I do find that the United States is system determining state still. From 1950s to till date, it is system determining the system, and China is competing or aspiring to become system determining states, trying to break this monopoly of one superpower, whereas India is trying to maintain itself in system influencing states, that it either unilaterally or multilaterally through multilateral actions that determines the system by different institutions, different organizations. And I think the other state with India, there is Japan, there is Russia, there is South Africa, Brazil, all these countries, Australia, they are system influencing states, that they are influencing the system and through multilateral actions and unilaterally somehow. But in South Asia, I'm talking about India. There are smaller states in South Asia that they are, I put them in the system affecting states, like Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. I put Pakistan. They have been now, they are having significant impact in the regional settings as well as in Asia. But they individually, they cannot act, they cannot influence, they cannot shape the region as well as the international order. But of course, there are system influential states that, like Bhutan, you can put in South Asia in this category. Now you can see basically what is the basic premise of NAM. The basic premise, it was considered as anti-West ideological crusade that was constructed in 1950s after Bandung Conference or Belgrade Conference in 1961. So how that, but it was basically anti-West ideological crusade that we will not think in the boxes. We will not think in the ideological boxes or with the particular goals, that we will think individually, independently. We will try to maintain strategic autonomy in our policy making. Now, in the present context, you can see that scale of global geopolitical balance have shifted and continue to shift. From USSR, it is shifting towards China. In Asia, or in China, there are in Asia, there are other powers economically, and nuclear power and military power are also emerging and shaping the order within Asia in particular, and in the global and in general. You can see, if you are looking at, and there are alignments and realignments are taking place. You know, in the West Asia, in Indo-Pacific region, we are well aware that how the states are moving ahead. And you do find that a state like India, who had been the founding member, who had been Nehru, Nasir, Tito was a phrase like, you know about non-alignment, that how they have come out with this movement, this ideology. India, being a founding member of non-alignment, the ideology of non-alignment is now believing more in multi-alignment policy. And that in multi-alignment policy, you can see that India is looking aligned with BRICS, with China, and with Russia, in SCO with China and Russia. But at the same time, India is also aspiring and joining Quad groupings that is excluding or counterbalancing the other Asian power within Indo-Pacific region. That kind of ideological realignments, or you can say political realignments and alignments, are taking place in Asian countries with the aligning with the Asian powers or with the global powers, and for different motives and different goals. That itself questions that what type of, how you are looking independently, how you are looking beyond the boxes today. Of course, you can also see that China is also trying to align or realign within the Asian countries, that how they are trying to cultivate Iran or Malaysia, or you can say Pakistan and Turkey to generate an alternative discourse within the Islamic world. That is one thing. How they are moving ahead with the different powers and through their Belt and Road initiatives that they are cultivating. But you can see that, of course, China was never part of non-alignment, and that never been. So we are not looking that how he can be concerned about this movement has been created by the visionary leader of the 1950s and 60s. But today you can see that India, particularly how much it is non-aligned, that is the first foremost point. While we are looking that India had signed civil nuclear deal with America in 2000, USA with 2005. You can see that number of other significant agreements was signed, particularly like Basic Exchange and Cooperation Agreement. BECA was signed with United States, along with the Logistic Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, and as well as communication capability and security agreements with the United States. Signing these agreements, these are very crucial, very critical, very significant agreements with the United States, where India was denied earlier to sign, like particularly BECA, if I'll say, India was not signing. Today, India has signed. So how much India is not aligned is a question. It's a question of analysis for understanding that is really India maintaining strategic autonomy or foreign policy or independent foreign policy, or you have partially aligned with the United States for different ideological goals and different understanding. But you can see that if the significant system affecting countries like India is joining a particular a country, and that itself makes and questions that their ideological or their commitment towards the non-alignment, what it was founded, was led by Nehru in 1950s and 60s. Of course, China, there are a number of factors that is taking place in Asia itself, particularly India is looking towards the aligning with the superpower or with the Western power, particularly the United States. That India has developed close strategic proximity with the United States in the lieu to how to cope with the rise of China. That was the biggest question, that how to cope with Chinese assertion or Chinese aggression within Asian countries, while you are having Doklam and Galwan conflicts, and while you are having constant nuclear threat from the Himalayan frontiers. So to counterbalance or to check or to manage this kind of threats, that you are aligning with the United States and developing close strategic partnership. But this aligning with the superpower or aligning with the United States questions your commitment towards the non-aligned movement today. Of course, the Chinese, how they are going to in Indo-Pacific region, in Southeast Asian countries, that is also a point that the other Southeast Asian countries are also looking different alliances, or are also looking the other powers in Asian power as well as the global power to align themselves to protect their interests, particularly the issue of South China Sea. It is well known that how the Philippines, Vietnam, and all other countries. The second very important point, that the Middle Kingdom theory of China, that the treatment, that the Middle Kingdom theory itself is an hierarchical in order and nature, and the Chinese, that they try to project themselves as a kingdom, and the other smaller states would be in the sway of the Chinese. That kind of that kind of construct become apprehended, and it is forcing the other Asian countries to align either within Asia or beyond Asia with the United States. But certainly the things are moving, that there are possibilities of new Cold War. And in this possibilities of new Cold War, how again the NAM will be relevant for the international communities. Whatever the objectives that non-aligned movement had in 1950s and 1960s, that you were fighting against against apartheid, you're fighting against racial discriminations, you're fighting for nuclear disarmament and all that issues. But even today, you can see this pandemic. In this pandemic, it has been highlighted that 60% workers had informal jobs in the planet, which comes around 2 billion people. They are mainly concentrated in global South, that is the South, where NAM is significantly representing. So you see that still the issue of the poverty, issue of unemployment is a dominant factor, or economic equality, the divide what the North and South had is still relevant, it's still significant before the international community or the Committee of the Nations. You can also witness the racial discrimination is still going on. This pandemic has also seen deep roots in the psyche of the whites against the non-whites, particularly in the developed countries and societies, even in 21st century. In UK itself, Black, Asians, ethnic minority communities comprise around 14% of the total population, but their proportion in COVID-related cases and deaths is around 33%. Need to remember here that these communities are the frontline providers of all essential goods and services, even the Western countries. You are well aware about that what happened with the Lloyd in United States, how he had been killed by the police, and that kind of discriminations, racial discriminations is well known in the world before the world community. Basically, to keeping these things pressing issues of global commons, where environmental issues, climate change, trade, investment, number of other issues had, and racial discriminations, apartheid, poverty, I mean, you can say the divided world, the inequality within the countries or between the Committee of Nations, you can see is pressing you to be united. There are two concepts of coming together or disintegrating yourself or keeping individual strength. One is that while you have crisis of success, that you want to become success, you wanted to bargain with the Western world on different issues, on issues of trade, on issues of climate, on issues of agriculture products, or on issues of racial discriminations. That crisis you can't deal individually. So far, you want to be united. You want that evolutionary process, that you are pulling the countries to come on one platform, and that was the fundamental reasons that the countries they had come together and united. They have come under the umbrella of non-aligned movement in 1961. That crisis of success, that you can't individually deal with the Western world, so you have to be united and you have to raise the voice, and there we will have South-South cooperation, and we will develop a North-South dialogue. And in that South-South cooperation, you can ask them to address the issues of the global South, because if you will not do, then there are crises of failure. And in this crisis of failure, what it had been in the 17th century and 18th century, the forces of imperialism or the colonial powers would dominate you differently. Economic imperialism will come, or they will make the colonies, or there will be issues of debt trap and other number of other issues would dominate. So it had forced you to go for a groups that is non-aligned movement in 1960s, because you had the crisis of success, and that you have brought. Today also there are pressing issues, there are concerns before the global community to come, because there are crisis of failure that you will have. If individually you will have the problem, then you will fail. Let me come with the background, what Nehru was thinking, what was the issues of Nehru at that time in South Asia, in the context of South Asia. He was a tall leader. He was talking, having a different construct, even about the region. He did not go with what the Americans, what the Western world has constructed. This is South Asia. He had quite broader ideas and perspective about the region. He said this is Southern Asia, and the Southern Asia constitutes from the Persian world to Indo-Pacific region, and that constitutes a region. It's not just 5-7 countries would be there, and where India would be the regional power, and other countries would be a smaller power, and they will not be, they will never be conferred. So Nehru had a broader perspective. He talks about the Asian Brotherhood. He had gone for the Asian Relations Conference and all that kind of vision. So he had a different perspective on understanding the Asia and the world. Basically, he wanted to have an independent foreign policy. He wanted to have strategic autonomy. If not surprisingly, India's post-independent policymaker, Nehru, were acutely sensitive to the significance of the colonial legacy. They explicitly sought to forge a pathway that would keep India outside the ambit of the Cold War politics. Such a strategy was possible because anti-imperialist sentiments were widespread within the Indian policy or polity across the political spectrum. This strategy came to be known as non-aligned, and Indian policymakers were at the pain of distinguishing it from the neutralism, because this was again and again questioned the India's policy during the non-alignment movement. In 1962, you have aligned with the United States as support to fight against China. In 1971, you had signed a peace and friendship treaty with USSR to fight the US domination in the South Asia countries. So it is not just, it is not neutralism. It was basically, you were talking about independent foreign policy. The real architect of this policy was Nehru, and he had basically the two factors can be attributed or explain Nehru's adoption of non-alignment or non-aligned foreign policy as a lodestar of India's foreign policy. First, he was acutely concerned about the opportunity cost of defense spending. India was an newly independent country. Sri Lanka was also had been under the colonial regime. Other developing countries, other Asian countries were also under the colonial powers. So he was conscious. He was concerned about the opportunity cost of defense spending. He was aware that any involvement with the two emerging blocs would draw India into the titanic struggle, or you can say divert critical resources from economic development. And second, he was intent on maintaining India's hard-won independence. Moving into ambit of either superpower could compromise such freedom of maneuvering. Let me mention here that it is not just you are not joining or you are just maintaining every neutrality that you will not interact with them. Nehru had first foreign visit to United States, and there Nehru had asked then administration to have a deeper cooperation in economic development, science, technology, and other areas to meet the newly independent states in 1947, 1948, 48. And that was, so Nehru wanted to align with them, but not for the military and not to work as a proxy or a client state, but as having an independent foreign policy. And he had visited to United States and asked to, but the terms and conditions what United States was asking on them, it was not accepted to Nehru. Let me come out with this one more very interesting submission about non-alignment. One scholar, professor, he was a professor in JNU, M.S. Rajan. M.S. Rajan said that, it is a misconception, or it is not, it's not rightly, we are not projecting that non-aligned movement is because there are Cold War politics and the world is divided into two blocks and you are not joining any block, and and you're keeping a neutral, independent foreign policy, this is non-alignment. He said, no, beyond this, there is one ideological, conceptual understanding of this movement, non-alignment movement. He said, this is a struggle, this is a fight against the colonial and imperialist or feudalist states from 16th century or 15th century onward, particularly after 1648 Westphalia Treaty, that nation states, they were very conscious about their independent sovereign entity, and to maintain this independent sovereign entity, that nation state had been fighting against the colonial, imperialist, feudalistic states all over the world, and that the non-alignment movement is not, the genesis of non-aligned movement is not just 1940s and 50s and 60s. It is more than 200 years old with the emergence of the nation state. The nation states were fighting against the colonial power and the imperialist power. So the relevance of non-alignment doesn't end with the end of the Cold War. It is continuing as it was before the Second World War or before the Cold War. It was relevant, and after the non-aligned, after the Cold War collapse of USSR, that non-aligned movement has collapsed. Basically, what was the important aspects? That the important aspect is that these scholars, these visionary leaders of the third world countries, they do not believe in the sovereign equality. They believe in the people's equality. That you consider that people, that third world countries, that 2/3 of the population are non-aligned movement countries had 2/3 of the population of the world. Their voice should be heard. It's not that the sovereign equality would dominate the discourse. That kind of the principles that they were rejecting, in fact. Very interestingly, I was reading one more article written by Rajan Harsey. Professor Rajan Harsey was talking in the morning also. I was in the lecture with him. He said that the political content is less relevant, but economic content is still relevant in the context of the non-alignment. The economic content of the non-alignment is still very significant, though politically it is not having covered by the international media or by the nation states. They are not much focusing. They are not participating in the summits. The head of the states are not participating in the summits, but the economic content of the non-alignment is still very relevant. I'll make few final submissions and then I'll close it. What are that? How it is the third world countries should look and should have their approach towards the non-alignment even today. One is that the country does not find its foreign policy and national interest in the boxes. Still, they should not look in the boxes and just with the goal-based. It should be principled. The core of their foreign policy, it should be value-based approach that the third world countries they should adopt. Of course, the Committee of Nations or the third world countries, they should try to retain maximum strategic autonomy to pursue its developmental goals. It's not to make the development, to achieve the developmental goals. You are trapped with the new colonial powers or the imperialist power, or under the economic imperialism. You are under either debt trap, or you are by different agreements that you will never come out from that kind of constructs. They have to be very conscious about this strategic autonomy, not only militarily, but economically. You have to maintain your autonomy. The third point is that that work to build national power as the foundation to create a more just and equitable world order. That all the third world non-aligned countries, the South, through the South-South cooperations, they should work to build national power as the foundation to create a more just and equitable world order. Outside power should not shape our thinking. That's the prime
thinks that we have to, the global powers, the world powers, the rising powers should not shape our thinking. We should have independent foreign policy. There are issues, and I have already talked about the eradication of racial discrimination, genuine non-proliferations. There are discriminatory world. South Asia is nuclearized, India, China, Pakistan nuclearized, Iran, there are question marks. North Korea, you can see that how what is the nuclear race is going on all over the world. I think there is need to have genuine non-proliferation regime in that. Through the South-South cooperation and through the non-aligned movement, it can become very important, particularly the issues, the emerging issues of environment and climate change, that creating a threat, concerns to the global South, particularly because of the developmental gaps, and because now the developing countries are developing, so they are investing, and that is raising the concerns of the climate change and environmental issues before them. Of course, we need to have a more stronger regime, particularly on the economic issues, because you can see the new international economic order in 1970s was the child of the non-aligned movement. They were asking to have new international economic order, and because of that, we had been that many of the concerns of these developing countries had been addressed. Need not to mention that other significant issues are emerging and dominating the discourse all over the world. We are aware about the issue of terrorism and fundamentalism, how the terrorism and fundamentalist forces are dominating the discourse in South Asia. You see that they are celebrating that you have won a particular territory based on the fundamentalist or extremist or radical act, and through terrorism, and so that's an alarming sign for any outfits, that violent outfits in South Asia or in Asian countries, that their moral would be boosted by this kind of act. I think we need to understand, we need to take it seriously. And the last point that I would say, that this pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic, had asked the international community, particularly the global South, particularly the developing countries, non-aligned countries. You can see Indian Prime Minister Modi did not participate in the last NAM summits, but he had addressed the on virtual mode to the non-aligned movement countries about the coronavirus pandemic, and mobilize the countries to cooperate in constructive manner to address this emerging issue. Of course, we need a democratic society, we need a democratic world order, and if the NAM through South-South cooperations unitedly pressing the issues, you can also address the concerns and issues in the United Nations, where there are five permanent members with the veto power is dominating the entire discourse. And you need to have reform, you need to make more democratic United Nation, then you have to raise a collective voice, and that could be possible while the all non-aligned countries will come together. So my understanding is that non-alignment, the issues and the concerns are still there, and that makes this movement relevant till date. Thank you very much, Jose. I think I should stop here.
That was very, very comprehensive, Professor. Thank you so much. When you talked on areas and you looked at the relevance, you not only reflected upon that which had happened in the 60s, 50s, and going back to the 40s as well, but also connecting it up, tying it up to what exactly is happening right now, how we are trying to make that connection right now. So that was something very, very important for us to focus on. Because when we look at that bigger picture, when we look at some of those points that Professor raised as well, whether it was realizing in the current context of the pandemic, and that's the point that you also ended with, Professor, 60% of the global population is in the informal sector, and a majority of these people are in the global South, which constitutes non-aligned movement and its membership. Professor, so questions are coming in. Please feel free to put in your questions into the chat box, and we will field them to Professor as we go along. Professor, a question has come in. asking about, and this is following up from a comment that you also made. So the former US ambassador to New Delhi, David C. Mulford, had stated that India does not seem to be interested in NAM anymore as it becomes more confident. Is NAM even more relevant anymore from an Indian perspective? And what would be the impact for countries in the region? I guess this is also coming from that point, Professor, where India was one of the leaders that really helped all of our countries come together with NAM. I remember it was in Bandung where Prime Minister Nehru said, he actually asked countries, he said, aren't you ashamed? You have just come out of one form of bondage. Do you want to go under another? And he said, India would even go it alone. I guess when we look back, India could say that, given India's size, India's potential, India's resources. But then India was that huge gelling factor that helped lots of our other countries come together too. But in the current context, do you think India has realized that there are other important aspects to focus on more than NAM?
I think very good questions had been raised about, particularly on India's stand about non-aligned movement. I think what was happening that in last 2 decades, there are a number of significant developments are taking place in Asia, but in the context of, and there are factors that India had developed close strategic partnership proximity with United States. But I would say in rather different way. It is not India who is developing the close strategic partnership and proximity with the United States. In fact, it is United States who is developing and opened its door for India in early 2000, you can say, while India has become a nuclear power, they have declared India as a nuclear power, as well as while India had become an emerging as economic power with the 8 to 9% of GDP growth. And there, the United States had identified the potential of India in this region in Asia that could be a source of stability, in a source of peace and stability in this in the Asia, because the track record that India had in the past, you can see it had been believing in the principles of peaceful resolutions of the conflict. You know, there were conflict between India and Pakistan on Kashmir issue. Nehru, rather than settling down with this issue with militarily, we had taken this issue to the United States that it should be peacefully resolved. So India, being a pioneer of peace and stability, I would say in the region, and United States looking at how the Chinese are coming in Asia. That is, of course, that is challenging the United States hegemony in Indian Ocean, in South China Sea or Indo-Pacific region. And the Americans, they had you can say found India as a natural ally to counterbalance China. But I don't know how much it would serve India's interest in long term, because the United States has very bad track records. Wherever they are going, they are not involved in the nation building process. You can see that how much nation building had been done in Afghanistan in last 2 decades. What is happening, and finally who had taken over Afghanistan. So if India has to be very careful. What Nehru was conscious, as I said, the first visit of Jawaharlal Nehru was United States, wanted to have economic and strategic, economic and technological partnership, but he was very conscious that not on the terms of the United States, that whatever we will do, the terms and conditions would be ours. And I think today also, if you are allying with the United States for your strategic and economic objectives in Indo-Pacific region and in Asia, I think we have to maintain our strategic autonomy. And to maintain this strategic autonomy, how much you are conscious about your strength of as soft power, how you are conscious about your neighbors' concern. I think I would mention here that India is, particularly in last 2 decades, has become very conscious about the neighbors, the dealing with neighbors. It is not what in 1970s and 80s India had been dealing with the now India had been very conscious conscious policy towards the neighboring countries, and there we tried to made a significant shift in India's neighborhood policy, so that you can manage, you can develop a confidence among the neighboring countries, and you can work as a team. And there, like particularly, India had come out from that reciprocity to non-reciprocity. That we will, on the basis of non-reciprocity, we will try to resolve the conflicts with the neighboring countries. Significant agreements had been made. You see with Bangladesh, with Nepal, that with CST regions, all that. India had also developed a policy of constructive unilateralism, that we will also help the neighboring countries, our neighbors, in the development, in their development goals. And there, we have extended line of credit to different Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, number of projects, housing projects and rail projects are going on in Sri Lanka. We have been invested around $3 billion in Afghanistan. So my point is very simple, that India had made a significant shift in its foreign policy towards the neighboring countries to take them into their confidence, so that the rivalry, the great powers rivalry, should not have negative impacts on South Asia region. As in 1950s, Pakistan signed Kyoto and CENTO, and they have brought Cold War politics on the door of South Asia. I think now in the new emerging possibilities of new Cold War, that should not, the epicenter should not be South Asia. And I think India's role is very important. How much you will keep your strategic autonomy, how much you will keep yourself non-aligned in a way that you will take independent states, you will take just stand for the development of humanity in this region. And I think that is expected. You see, maybe India was not interested in last few years, but during the coronavirus, Prime Minister Narendra Modi had a virtual meeting with the officials of non-alignment and asked to have a better cooperation among the non-aligned countries. So I do find that, I think rather there are policies of multi-alignment, but it could be also termed as opportunism. But that could be that one time you are aligning with the China in SCO and in BRICS, and other time you are aligning with Quad groupings with the United States and having that kind of significant. I don't know how much it would serve the economic interest or the peace and security of this region. We have to be very conscious about our policies with dealing with these two powers. One is Asian power and another is global power.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Professor, I want to tie up two questions where Hashan is asking, could you distinguish between neutralism and non-alignment? And I guess this is a perennial debate that we have faced on so many occasions. And Isru is asking this question. Of course, Isru has identified a few countries, but if we would look at a more general perspective, has any country been truly non-aligned when we look back?
Very, very good question. I think this has been raised again and again. Not today, in 1960s, 70s, while in 1960s, while India had asked United States help to fight against China. In 1971, while India had signed peace friendship treaty with USSR and defeated Pakistan in 1971. It has been questioned again and again. But I do find, what was the vision? If I can draw. There are three types of people. A very simple example I'm giving one is that you lit the fire, and another that you stop the fire, and third you say that I did not lit the fire, so I'll not stop the fire. That is the neutralism, that I will neither good and neither with the bad. Non-alignment is that I'm with the just, I'm with the good thing, wherever it is. So you criticized while there is Soviet invasion in Afghanistan in 1979, India criticized the Soviet invasion in Afghanistan, though we have signed Peace and Friendship Treaty in 1971. So my point is there that you are with the just. And I think that developing countries of South Asia, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and if there are really the issue of humanity, there are issue of broader concerns, and there are common global comments. I think we need to understand, we need to go with the just, what is good for the human being. And I think that is the non-alignment. It is a very, very holistic, very ideology that brings all the countries together. However, it has been misused number of times. Like Palestine had misused to mobilize the world community against Israel. Cuba has misused to mobilize the international community against the United States. That had happened in the past, that some of the countries, for their benefit, they had misused this platform. But I think we have larger global concerns of environment, poverty, women empowerment, terrorism, fundamentalism, number of pandemics, like global health issues and all that. And this platform is very relevant, because the developed countries, they are developed. They had better resources to fight these problems. But the developing countries are still, our good number of people are still illiterate, poor. How many people they eat one-time food in a day. And I think that is concentrating in global South. And for that, these kind of institutions is very relevant. Military race will not help you to feed your poor people and to educate your poor people and develop their human index.
Absolutely. Professor, leading on to this question that Harisma has asked, will India try to remain as a part of the system influencing states always? It's going back to the theoretical foundation that you laid out so expertly at the beginning. I guess Harisma is asking that question.
No, all the powers, I think all the powers in the world is aspiring to become system determining states. That's the only, and the way India is aspiring that we will become 5 trillion economy. You are trying to mobilize, you are going different parts of the world, you are aligning economically, you are joining different economic institutions as well to strengthen your economic base, your economy, and you are aspiring to become system determining states, though we are system influencing states. My point is there, I think my point very simple, that we should look in the people's equality, that all the people's concerns should be addressed, either you are in a system influencing states or system determining states. It's not that a state should work, their interests should be driven as a hard power, a military power. That would not serve the interest of the humanity, because there are humanitarian concerns, serious humanitarian concerns are still pending there.
Professor, we have 2 more questions. One has come in from Shantini, where Shantini says, with the rise of China, has the conceptual background of non-alignment shifted from US and Russia, or US and Soviet Union, to US and China?
No, I think still she's indicating, I think she's, if I'm correct, she's indicating the new Cold War between China and United. I think it's too early to say. Still, there are asymmetry between the United States and China. Military asymmetry is there, economic asymmetry is there, and you will see that the influence, the global political influence, the United States is still very, very powerful. So China is trying to dominate the discourse first in the global South through Belt and Road initiatives, through different investment projects, but that has also been taken by very suspiciously, or people are apprehensive with the Chinese investment. Not all, but number of the countries, they are very apprehensive. India is not joining BRI, how it would go ahead. So my point is still, it's too early to project that the world will be there would be Cold War or new Cold War between China and United States, and China will compete with the United States. They are competing economically. There are complex interdependencies, but still United States is leading the discourse, and how it would go ahead, we will see. Because China, there are serious problems that there are internal problems within in China, particularly on the issue of that inequality is there. China is not the leading economy. China is basically aging economy. Aging the population, the large number of old people are in China. So how much it would continue the pace of development in future is still a point of investigation and research. So my simple submission is there that China is going in different parts of the world. There are a number of projects. I would give you very good example, like China and Nepal has signed 9 MOUs while Xi Jinping visited there. And out of 9 MOUs, if I, as an academician and neutral observer, only one MOU was viable or was viable to work, like developing Pokhara port. Other 9 were not. Just you are giving incentives and coming with the projects, but they were not viable on the ground. But you are coming because you have deep pockets. So you have through deep pockets, you want to invest the world. So my point is that Chinese also understand that yes, cooperation among the South Asian countries and balanced and systematic, or you can say wise, rational cooperation with the developing countries or with the Asian countries would help China to rise. Confrontational politics would not help China to rise if the forces or the mindset of 1962 will dominate the Indian community through and the memories will revive through Doklam and Galwan. I think India and China would not come together on particularly the projects like BRI. So my point is that China has to, if they are really thinking and becoming a soft power and projecting as a soft power and economic power, so they should really mean it about that. It's not that you are engaging a country economically, but you are also showing your military might on border issue. That would not work together, and that would not help China to achieve its global power status to compete with the United States in Indo-Pacific region.
Professor, we'll come to our last question, Professor. And Srivan says, currently there is a debate in the realm of international relations if China would invade Taiwan in the near future, and Quad is said to defend Taiwan. Being an important member in both Quad and SCO, would India intervene given its long-standing non-aligned foreign policy? I guess that's a bit of a tough one there.
Yeah, it's very difficult, very tricky questions. But India, we need to understand the premise and basic ethos and principles of India's foreign policy. That had been in the 1950s and 60s. We talk about democracy. We talk about secular inclusive ethos. We had been fighting against the colonial powers. We had been fighting against the imperialist power. You can see after the Second World War or after UN, around 90 countries had been decolonized all over the world. So if any part of the world, any country in the world is aspiring to have a democratic setup, independent setup, I think India should continue to extend their support for promotion of democracy and promotion of fight against anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist forces all over the world. China is very concerned. Just you are not talking about Taiwan. There are concerns in Xinjiang province. There are concerns in Tibet as well, and there are the international community is keeping eyes on that. I think that China should also have an inclusive policy with these troublesome areas, and that would help China to achieve its global power status. Confrontational or keeping Taiwan issue alive, keeping Xinjiang and Tibet issue alive would not help the Chinese. So my point is there, what India would go, India will definitely support the women rights or human rights and democratic rights and civil political rights of the people wherever the country is there. And I think that was the basic principles of non-alignment foreign policy. However, the real hard politics, pragmatic politics sometimes dominates the discourse. You lose some, you compromise for a time being, and you do a better thing. While in 1971, the Pakistan military had killed 3 million innocent civilian people. 30 lakh innocent civilian people were killed, and around 3 to 5 lakh women were raped in East Pakistan in 1971. India intervened. India signed peace and friendship treaty with USSR, and we intervened and we defeated the brutal army of Pakistan in Bangladesh, and Bangladeshi people had liberated, and they are till date, you know, this is the 50 years of the independence of Bangladesh. This is the 50 years of the victory. They are thankful to India that we had been liberated from the brutal army that was the genocide. So my point is there, if you have compromised with the non-alignment, if you say signing the peace and friendship treaty with USSR for larger humanity goals, India would further would go ahead, because it is not it's not the neutrality. You are fighting with you are having independent foreign policy for just cause. So that is the objective I think India should follow in future as well.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you so very much, Professor, not only for your very, very in-depth, comprehensive presentation in the beginning, where you covered such a vast area in terms of looking at the relevance of the non-aligned movement in the 21st century, but even in terms of responding to the queries, the remarks that have come in, the questions that have come in. You touched on some very salient points there, even if you look at the term neutralism or non-alignment and whether countries have actually been that, but understanding what it is. And this is where there is relevance even to date. We can look at certain areas, and you also raised the whole economic realm. That economic transformation, I guess, is one of the most important areas, especially in a situation of the pandemic, where we need to see a lot more effort being made in order to make non-aligned movement relevant, but also realize that this is a movement. This is another term that we use. They did not name it the non-aligned organization. They did not name it the non-aligned association. I guess even the use of the word movement, movements gather momentum and movements can lose momentum. But the important thing is to remain committed to what you want to do, what you set out to do, and to try to achieve that. So thank you very much to everyone who took time to send in questions, to also join us for this Awarelogue Lecture Forum today. Professor, we are absolutely appreciative of your giving us your time and your expertise to share this with us today. The Awarelogue Initiative is focusing on the non-aligned movement this month. In a week's time, on the 17th of September, we will have Dr. Keitha Ponkalan from the Salisbury University, who's going to be talking about the non-aligned movement, its principles and their relevance for Sri Lanka's foreign policy going forward, how we look at the whole concept of non-alignment from a Sri Lankan perspective. So that's going to be our next stage. That's going to be on the 17th of September, Friday at 6 p.m. And we have several other events also planned for this particular month through the Awarelogue Initiative and the many platforms that we have. So thank you once again, Professor. Thank you so much for taking your time and joining us.
Thank you, Dr. George, for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All the very best and have a good evening.
Thank you.